Impact of Influence.
Covering true crime throughout the Southeast.
Hello, friend. Matt Harris and Seton Tucker. Always grateful that you're going to spend time with us. This is part 2 of our interview with Dick Harpootlian. A lot of interesting things Dick has to say in this episode. In part 1, we discussed the tragic case he tried with Joe McCulloch. Joe will also be on this episode. The story we are covering today comes with a warning. There's a brief graphic description of some of the claims made by South Carolina serial killer Wee Gaskins in his autobiography.
Now, if you didn't listen to part 1, go back and listen to that. Dick and Joe talk about this complete tragedy. It involves the murder of 2 adults living in an unlicensed group home who were murdered by one of their housemates who really had no business living there.
No. In this episode, we discuss with Dick Harpootlian his new book about Wee Gaskins, the South Carolina serial killer who murdered 15 people. Harpootlian tried Gaskins for the death penalty and won, and eventually Wee was sent to death row and killed for his crimes. But before we get started, we want to encourage people.
Yeah, we want to encourage you to join in the conversation on our Facebook page, Impact of Influence, and also on our YouTube channel, Impact of Influence. So please subscribe to our channel and rate and share our podcast. It would be greatly appreciated. And we are part of the Evergreen podcast company, and we hope that you will support our sponsors.
Please do. Before we get into the interview, just a little bit about Joe and Dick, if you haven't heard. Joe McCulloch, former prosecutor, dedicated to representing and defending clients accused of serious crimes, founder and past president of the South Carolina Association of Criminal Defenders, and a founder of Palmetto Innocence Project, professor at USC Law School. Dick Harpootlian, former solicitor for the 5th Judicial Court, former chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, former South Carolina senator, and Alex Murdaugh's defense attorney. And we'll talk about his book here in just a second. Now, you read Wee Gaskins' autobiography called The Final Truth.
Oh, I read this back in the early 90s, and I remember sitting on the beach in daylight. It wasn't even night, and having to put the book down because it was making me physically nauseated. Like
Yes.
it was so disturbing.
And a lot of people question how truthful the book was.
Well, no, I was glad that Dick brought that up, that maybe a lot of these claims were embellished.
And that's...
But even if they're embellished, that's what was in his mind.
Yes, it was in mind, and it disturbed you as a youngster, and still does.
Yeah, I wasn't that young, but still, I probably should not have read that book. That was a book that I wish I could unread.
Well, Dick Harpootlian's book we want to read, but we start with Dick, with Seton telling Dick about how much Wee Gaskins' autobiography disturbed her. Here's the interview.
I read that horrible book, I think I was in college, and I read it, and I remember having to put it down because I was honestly physically nauseated by some of this. I can't remember what the name of the book is, but I don't recommend it to anybody.
And we had interviewed...
He wrote an autobiography, didn't he, Dick?
Yeah, that was a book that was written prior to his execution and published afterwards, where he makes I know you find this shocking, but a guy that killed 14 people might have exaggerated or lied. It was much of what you read that made you sick. And I read the book because I knew Gaskins well. It's most of it's not true. The fact that he killed 100 people, picked up hitchhikers, raped them, cut off women's nipples and ate them.
I know, that was where we're going to have to put some sort of disclaimer on the front of this episode. But
It's only going to get worse with Harpootlian, but everything in your book is true, right?
Everything in my book is true based on official. Well, first of all, there's a recounting of all of the 13 murders before, and I'll show you this. This just happens to be sitting here. This is a transcript of an interview that the solicitor in 1978 interviewed Gaskins about all the murders he had committed. At the time, Gaskins had been sentenced to death. Furman versus Georgia came down. That was reversed. The sentence was reversed, and he thought he was facing a retrial where he could get the death penalty. Summerford convinced him and his lawyer of that. And what Summerford said is, if you tell us every murder you committed. We will not charge you with those. And by the way, he could not have been charged with death penalty for anything that happened prior to Furman. And so this is 500 pages.
Wow.
Transcript of Pee Wee confessing to those other 13 murders. So when I say it's factually based, it's from his mouth, and we interviewed all the SLED agents that were involved and corroborated all of it. So details of the previous murders are accurate. Details of his early life come from his juvenile records. What happened was we prosecuted him in 83. I was deputy solicitor. I left, went into private practice, came back and ran for DA or solicitor in 90 and took office in 91. And he was executed in early 90 or in sometime in 91. And the clerk of court came to me and said, we've got all this stuff that's exhibits in his trial, and normally we just throw them out. Do you want them?
Oh, wow. You
And
were dealing with the treasure trove.
this is one of the exhibits. And we got, all the tapes, the tape where he arranges to blow up Tyner on death row. But it is entirely 100% cross-checked 3 different ways. There's nothing in there that's not true or even speculation. But this is a book about Gaskins' development from an abused young man through his stay in a number of juvenile institutions to running away and living in the carnival, living and traveling with the carnival, coming back, a series of arrests. He spent more time in jail than out during his life. And my progression from long-haired hippie anti-war in the late 60s to ending up to being a homicide prosecutor from the mid 70s till 83 when we prosecuted Gaskins. So it's based on a conversation that I had with Gaskins. And Gaskins was a very affable, friendly. That's one of the reasons he got away with all the murders for so long, was that nobody ever thought Pee Wee would kill anybody. 5'2", little guy, squeaky voice, had talents like he was an electrician, plumber. He could do roofing. Everybody knew him in the community. Everybody liked him. In the courtroom, in the middle of the trial took 6 weeks, and we're on a break for lunch. And I'm sitting over at the prosecution table working on the next witness or notes or whatever. And Pee Wee's at the defense table with 2 guards, and it's just us in the courtroom. And I hear him, and he says, Dick. And by the way, how many defendants have I ever been on a first name basis with? None.
Zero.
Zero. So, but we'd spent weeks in, passing, and him at the table, and Jack Swirling, who was defending him, and I were old college, and we ended up old college friends, went into practice together later on with Joe.
We've had Jack on our podcast. He was such a great person to interview.
Yeah.
He's a great interview. But he says, Dick. I said, what do you want, Pee Wee? He says, you're a lot like me. I said, what the hell are you talking about? He said, you like killing. I said, what? What are you talking about? I like killing. I don't like killing. Yeah, you do, because you like killing me.
Oh, Jesus.
I said, I'm not like you, okay? And but what left? And I got angry with him about even saying something like that, because here I am, proud of the job I'm doing. I'm prosecuting him within the rules, trying to see justice is done. But later on, and of course, after he was convicted, he would call the office. He sent me Christmas cards. The guy. And when you look back on it and you read all the murders, most of the murders he committed were people that he gained their trust, and when their back was turned, he stabbed them or shot them in the head or beat them to death or strangled them or whatever. So it was his MO to befriend people that he would ultimately end up killing. Sort of worries me a little bit now that I think back on it. But my phone would ring at my house. My mother one day said, who was visiting, came and said, hey, there's a guy on the phone for you. I said, who is it? And she said, a guy named Gaskins. I went absolutely ballistic. Pee Wee, don't call my house.
Yeah.
He's on death row, and don't call my house.
Jeez.
Con man. And of course, 2 weeks before he was to be executed, I'd been elected DA or solicitor in 90. And so in 91, I'm the solicitor. He arranged or asked his son to kidnap my 4-year-old daughter and hold her hostage and call me and tell me to have him brought up to the courthouse, which I could have done. And I think he figured he could escape once he got to the courthouse. And the son, in his statement later on, said his dad, he asked his dad, well, what if Harpootlian won't do that? And he said, kill her.
Jesus.
Okay.
What did your wife say? Did she say you have to change your job?
She was not happy. And I did not run for solicitor again. That was part of the calculation was, I mean, when you're dealing with folks like that close up, it's scary. And when they try to kidnap your 4-year-old daughter, it
God,
really does. But my point is, the book came about because in that night I was invited to the execution. I didn't go because, again, I don't like killing. I'm not Pee Wee Gaskins.
And it was weird. I remember there were, like, on the news at the time, it was almost like a celebration. People were celebrating outside.
Hundreds of people there at his execution. But I could have had, sat there and watched his eyeballs explode, his hair catch on fire, him die a horrible death. Why would I want to? I mean, you are Pee Wee Gaskins.
You're so graphic. You're so graphic.
Yeah.
Lurid. And the name of your book is
Dig Me a Grave. Oh, the name of the book is Dig Me a Grave, and you can order it by going to dickharpootlian.com. Thank you, Joe. You can order it, dickharpootlian.com.
Here to serve.
I like he brought us all back in.
Yeah. 5% of all proceeds go to Joe McCulloch.
No, Amanda's going to buy me lunch.
There you go. Yeah, good luck with that, Joe.
So Joe brings me back to reality. But the book, I think, I've been working on it. I got an agent, got a guy named Sean Assell, who's a New York Times bestseller writer, to help me write it. I'm a pretty good lawyer. I did some writing years ago, but writing a book I now know, is an immense undertaking. And we were getting there, and then I had to go try Murdaugh for 6 weeks. And what I realized halfway through that trial, millions of people watching it, there were people in sleeping bags outside the courtroom who were staying overnight to get a seat in the court. I mean, I'll never forget, we were walking up and somebody's getting out of a sleeping bag, and I said, "Where are you from?" "Oklahoma."
Wow.
"Were you just around here?" "No, I drove from Oklahoma to be in the courtroom."
Wow.
I said, it's on TV, right? I mean, and the view on TV is better than you're going to get in the courtroom.
Right.
The view behind Joe's head.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So, and it was a phenomenon with the blogs and
what is that?
all of that it just took me. I did not understand up until then the fascination with true crime, to be frank with you. I mean, I've been around crime all my life, but I didn't understand. And I tried a poor TV live death penalty case back in the 80s. There was some public notice, and I got a phone call or two when I got back to the office. There was no internet. There was no text. There was no, website. So, but that another dimension. And so when I got done with that, I said, damn, I better get this book done.
Well,
yeah.
I want to tell you too. So I read in the Post and Courier, there was an article that you were quoted in about this new, I think there's like a scripted series coming out. And I guess the guy who was cast to play you was an actor from Parks and Rec. I cannot recall his name. So can you tell our listeners what your reaction to your casting?
I mean, I heard, I don't watch Parks and Rec, so I went immediately to the internet. I looked at his picture, and he's a little fat guy. And
Danny DeVito was unavailable.
well, he's a little taller than DeVito, but he certainly, I don't think he looks like me. And
I didn't see the resemblance.
Yeah, and I had some derogatory comment in the Post and Courier about his physical appearance. In the New York Post, I suggested Ozempic. So I'm sure he's going to massacre me. Look, the fact that they haven't cast anybody for the judge or Jim Griffin or Creighton Waters means the trial is not in this movie. I mean,
I've got a big part, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, they got some silver hair guy sitting in the.
Right. So this has got to be about the Paul boat case, which I was in early on, and Mandy Matney, who wrote the book, and I'm participating in this, does not like me. I've never had much nice to say about her, and I'm sure I'm not going to be treated well. But you know what? That's showbiz.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to Joe about this topic before. There's this automatic hatred of defense attorneys until you need one, right? Absolutely. And defense attorneys have their job.
Well, yeah, and Joe knows Jim Griffin and I went to CrimeCon, right?
Oh yeah.
And oh my God, I mean, 2,000 people in our audience, 4,000 for Creighton. If they asked it once, they asked it 200 times. How can you represent somebody like Alex Murdaugh?
Sixth Amendment?
Well, I remind him, John Adams, second president of the United States, represented the British soldiers at the Boston Massacre, got 4 of them acquitted and 2 of them suspended sentences. Abraham Lincoln defended 20 murder cases. It's an American constitutional right. There's nothing nefarious about, and I was a prosecutor, I was a defense attorney. I'm a lawyer. And people have a right, as long as you play the game within the rules.
Right.
You're ethical, you don't make up evidence, you don't hide evidence, you do it right. I mean, I think I told one of them, I said, that is an extraordinarily uninformed, uneducated, and juvenile attitude. I think that's why they didn't like me much.
Yeah. Will we have another Murdaugh trial?
Absolutely.
There you go.
I mean, I don't know how you get around the jury tampering issue. I think there's plenty of other issues, but I think the jury tampering issue is the icing on the cake. I don't know how you get around the fact that she, at the minimum, attempted to tamper with the jury. I mean, that's what Judge Toll found. She, I think, applied the wrong standard. She said you have to have more than just an attempt by a court official. You've got to show it influenced a juror, which we did show, by the way, but she found that not credible. But even without that, there's a federal case directly on point.
And Joe, I think we read a letter that you wrote asking what the status of the investigation is. And I think your client is maybe possibly going to be interviewed by SLED finally after a long period of time.
They've already been interviewed.
Oh, I have been interviewed. Okay.
It was worth that 50-cent stamp.
Right.
They were interviewed last week, both of the jurors.
But this is important to understand. So the agency who is invested in sustaining the conviction of Alex Murdaugh is the agency tasked to interview witnesses that would perhaps undo that conviction. Are we missing some problem, some conflict here? Am I over concerned? No.
So you think who would be the proper agency to investigate?
They could get a sheriff's department. They could get Leon Lott at the Richland County Sheriff's Department. They could get the Greenville County Sheriff's Department, the Charleston County Sheriff. They all have great investigators. This isn't a complicated crime.
Is this what happens in other states and other jurisdictions?
Well, in other jurisdictions, maybe even the feds would come in.
Okay.
But there are other agencies that can investigate this, and other agencies other than the AG ought to be supervising it. I mean, they have a huge investment in this case and a huge investment in making sure that conviction sticks.
Even though the role of the Attorney General's office allegedly is to make sure there's justice and make sure it's fair. And I've always said I thought that it would be good if Creighton or Alan Wilson would say, "Hey, we know the guy's guilty, and we're going to overturn every rock to make sure he had a fair trial because we are 100% sure, and we don't want any questions." That would be.
Whoa. You believe in Santa Claus too, right?
He does. He told me just last week, and the Easter Bunny.
And the Easter Bunny, absolutely.
Yeah. And I believe that you had long hippie hair too at one point.
But I mean, it's you're right. It's frustrating, and it's frustrating to those of us involved in the system, because again, if you do what we do, whether you're prosecuting or defending, the way you put your head down on your pillow every night and sleep soundly is knowing you did it ethically, you did the right thing. When you start cheating, when you start making up evidence or hiding evidence, or not operating in what is a transparent way, I mean, I would be bothered by that. I mean, you're bringing yourself, just like I talked about Pee Wee. I didn't want to be on his level. I didn't want to be a killer like him. Well, if you're prosecuting somebody for financial crimes based on their deception and lying, if you approach scrutinizing something that may have gone wrong with the trial in the way they're doing it, they're no better than he is.
It's a very perfect place to end it.
Matt, Seton, let me say this for my clients, these two jurors, the last clients I hope I represent in the Murdaugh saga. They came forward. They were insistent on being interviewed, even though to some extent maybe there was some kicking and screaming to interview them. It got done last week. They believe that what occurred during the trial, part of which resulted in one of them being removed from the jury, was foul ball. They believe they're not advocates of Alex Murdaugh's innocence. Sorry, Dick. They believe he did not get a fair trial. They believe that even he should get a fair trial.
And both of your clients also had their personal reputation blown apart.
Oh, they've been harassed, and I know it'll be shocking to Mandy Matney, but the fact is that they're in this because they believe the system should work properly. Yeah. And they believe that this should be investigated properly by people with no skin in the game, no goal orientation, and they're hopeful.
And we, I got to tell you, this isn't about Alex Murdaugh, whether you like him or dislike him. It's about whether the system can be trusted to give everybody a fair trial. And if you want to read how that can happen, dig me a grave, dickharpootlian.com.
Look, now you're getting it, Dick. Now you're getting it. Well,
we really appreciated y'all coming on. It was a really fun interview.
Yeah, we expect our complimentary book signed.
Absolutely.
And Joe, we'll have you back on to tell us about your literary skills that are going on right now too.
I'll send you a piece of it.
When you have him back on, have him explain the animal head that's above him.
I was wondering.
I know.
No. That was his family pet, and he missed him so much that when it died, that dog died, he had to have it in the office on the wall. Isn't that right, Joe?
Not even close.
Once again, the prosecutor and the defense team, different stories of why the head's on the wall.
We're going to get to the bottom of that at some point.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Both episodes with those guys was great. Part 1 and now part 2. It's really interesting to see he has what appears to be very big confidence that Alex Murdaugh will have another trial. But of course, he's Alex's attorney.
Well, I think any defense attorney is going to say, for sure, it's in the bag. But right. I think that there is a shot. I mean, other legal experts that I've seen comment on this think that, that there are some really valid appellate issues.
And we shall see the next 4 or 5 months. And the fact that there's been some movement by SLED to interview the 2 jurors that Joe represented shows that the investigation at least has that part of it has begun. I don't know how much has happened up to this point, but that hadn't happened up to this point.
Yeah. Well,
so that's important.
I'll be interesting to see what the filings show and what SLED's investigation reveals.
And what the state the response to the Supreme Court will be. South Carolina Supreme Court. All right. So again, always grateful. YouTube channel, Impact of Influence. Facebook, Impact of Influence. Evergreen Podcast Network. Support our sponsors, or we can't keep doing this thing. And as always, we're grateful. We'll talk soon, friend.